But head on a swivel here. We will be breaking down the first day of free agency in the National Football League legal tampering, which just means it's the day that free agency kicks off. Lots of news all over the NFL, including the Washington Commanders making their first splash today, going out and getting defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw. Turns 28 in October. He's a 27-year-old coming off of his 5th NFL season. Adam Peters was in San Francisco when Kinlaw was drafted 14th overall by the 49ers back in the pandemic year in 2020. And if we're being frank, he's been a disappointment since then. On to his second team last year with the Jets, a career-high 4.5 sacks, a career-high 5 tackles for loss, and the second-best season in his career in terms of hits on the quarterback with 5. This is not a guy that puts up pass rushing counting stats. The grades for him against the run have not been overly favorable. But obviously, Peters, by giving him 3 years and $45 million, 15 per, basically guaranteeing him the first 2 years of this deal at $30 million. Obviously, Peters thinks that there's more in the tank for this 27-year-old than what he's put on his Pro Football Reference page.
Yeah, 3 things super quick. Hello, Grant and Dave. How are you on free agency day? That's number 1. Number 2, Ovi scored again. 8 away of tying. Single digits. It's happening. Third, this is one of those, you got to really stretch and go benefit of the doubt here. Peters knows better than all of us. Obviously, scouted, drafted, familiar with his work for the beginning of his career for several years. Saw an awful lot. What went in on a daily basis in terms of training, dedication, etc. Because the numbers haven't been there, the grades haven't been there, the impact on games. Talking about Kinlaw now, simply hasn't been there. So what you're doing is you're betting big that it will be, because that's not top of the market money. I mean, the money is not quite NBA ridiculous, where if you've dribbled the basketball 3 consecutive times, you're now a $35 million dude. But the money's flying here. Guys are getting paid. We'll go through all these different signings. But for Washington, this is a betting big to me, at least betting medium, that he will outproduce dramatically what John Allen would have given you at a little bit more of a salary cap hit. I don't know that I feel that way, to be honest with you. Just calling balls and strikes here, I'm not as confident that they're going to get a lot out of Javon Kinlaw.
Well, they just made Javon Kinlaw the 19th highest paid defensive tackle in the NFL at 15 per year. They also have, I believe, the 8th or 9th highest paid player right now in Daron Payne at $22.5 million per year at D tackle. But presuming that Payne is going to be on the roster and starting for them, and there's no reason after they moved on from Allen that you wouldn't anticipate that. Payne is 28. You lock him in Sharpie. They drafted Johnny Newton just outside of the first round last year in the top 40 at 36 overall. You would have thought he would have been starting, but you're not bringing in Kinlaw to not play him a ton. And I know that the D tackle position is one where there is a rotation. Here's how I feel about this. Kinlaw has to be able to stop the run, or else this will not work. If he can help you against the run, then this can absolutely be a win. If that's not going to be a strength, if he's going to be a liability, which at times, according to the PFF grade in San Francisco, he was, then I don't really understand this, because he's not going to be an elite pass rushing D tackle. And I actually think you have 2 guys that you pay to do that already. In Payne's case, a lot of money. And in Newton's case, that's largely why you drafted him, to be a disruptor, to be a guy that gets up the field and pushes the pocket and collapses the interior. That's what he was at Illinois. Javon Kinlaw doesn't really put up those kind of pass rushing numbers to make you think that that's what he is. But obviously, they think he can help make them better against the run. Danny, last year they were 28th in yards per play against the run, 28th of 32 teams. And since then, they have released D tackle John Allen. And while I loved bringing Bobby Wagner back, and I viewed it as the right thing to do, he is getting a year older, was already not fast laterally sideline to sideline. So you got older at Mike linebacker, and you didn't bring one of your better D tackles back for a team that was bottom 5 stop in the run. So you had to do something up the middle. This was that something to kick off free agency. They clearly know it's a problem. The question is just, and you give them the benefit of the doubt because they were awesome last year at a lot of the moves they made, especially in free agency. But do they know better than a lot of the people that have covered him in San Fran and New York and in those 2 teams where basically they're saying, yeah, I'm not so sure this guy's the run stuffer that you want him to be. But that's what this has to be for me to make this make sense.
There's got to be a schematic fit that people aren't thinking about. There's got to be some sort of skill set that makes sense in their one-gap scheme that he wasn't doing in other places. Again, this is one of those where there's a reason I'm not making these decisions, and I shouldn't. I'm not qualified to, and most of us aren't, obviously. But when you look at it on paper and the data that we have access to, you go, I don't really see this one. I don't really get this one. This is not here's our first order of business, establishing what we're looking for, right? I mean, as you know, the instant the clock strikes noon and everybody starts going fast and furious, you see what the priorities are. When Carlton Davis gets signed, one of the best cornerbacks on the market, that's where we needed to upgrade. That was our first priority. This is their first order of business. Doesn't mean they weren't calling other guys,
right?
But they're going, we're getting this one done. We're going to show you, like, this is our mission statement. Whoa, I don't know. This is one of those, maybe if you waited around, you could have gotten a little bit cheaper or not at all. And I think you probably could have found another Kinlaw somewhere else for not as much, just given what he's done or hasn't done in this league.
I'm even willing to admit that this is a fault of mine. I don't necessarily think this is a good thing all the time, but I will never get upset with money spent on football players that have a chance to make you a lot better. Like day one, day two of free agency, you can make big mistakes. You can give out bad contracts that are costly because that money could have gone elsewhere. And that's why I say about this move, I'm whelmed. Like, I like it okay. I do not love it. To me, on a 1 to 10, this is like a 4.7 in the sense that I would probably not have done it, just barely. But I'm also never going to get upset about adding to the trenches. In this division with Philadelphia, seeing what we just saw in the Eagles stretch run and in the Super Bowl, I don't think you can have enough quality defensive linemen. I don't think you can have enough good offensive linemen. So I'm just not going to get upset at throwing money at either front ever necessarily. But I am very curious about this. Like, I want to know what I don't understand. And that's what I would like to ask them if we had a chance to. Mm-hmm. They're way too busy trying to add more football players, so they're not going to be answering that question anytime soon for us. But when I look up any of the grades that are available on various sites, including PFF, and that's not the end-all be-all, the run stuffing numbers are not particularly good in terms of how he was evaluated. And that was part of the knock in San Francisco. I do think he played the best football of his career last year with the Jets. That's pretty obvious when you look at 4.5 sacks and the tackles for loss. Still not impressive. The quarterback hits. These are not big numbers. We're talking about 5 all year in 17 games. But it was the best he'd been statistically. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's interesting to them. But they love guys that they know. This has been very clear since last year. There are players that came here for Anthony Lynn. See Austin Eckler in the backfield. There are players who came here from Ken Norton. See Bobby Wagner. There's a slew of guys that came here from Dallas. See Dante Fowler and Tyler Biadasz and Dorrance Armstrong because of Dan Quinn. Adam Peters has a type too. He went and got Deebo Samuel. Now the next big move is Javon Kinlaw. These are guys he helped acquire in San Francisco. That's part of this, is that, to your point, they know the guy, and I think they bet on the character and the player doing what they need him to do.
So I want to be clear. I don't hate this. I'm not like angry. This isn't a Rivera level signing or a bit of ineptitude. I'm not saying that at all. This is one of those, I think I would say I'm in a similar boat to you here, Jeeps, where I'm kind of scratching my head going, they've got to know something that we don't. Because there's just me as a rudimentary observer reading the same things and watching the same things and refreshing Twitter every 7 seconds, looking at NFL Network or whatever's got a tracker going on. I go, this is not the one that makes the most intuitive sense. Like there are players, for example, like once DJ Reed went and once Carlton Davis is gone, I'm sitting there going, announce Charvarius Ward. Like, give me that. Like, that's a priority. Let's get that done. What they did is kind of reshuffled their defensive tackle room a little bit. You swapped out John Allen, saved about $16 million. You're going to pay $30 million guaranteed, basically $15 million per over the next 2 seasons. Kind of about a 1-for-1 swap there, as close as you can get it with the new salary cap rules.
Right.
And so how much different is Kinlaw than Allen? I mean, I think that's a very fair question. I don't know the answer to that. They do, but I'm not sitting there upset. I'm just kind of going, I don't quite get this one just yet.
He's not better. I can promise you that. But he's 27 and Allen's 30.
Yeah.
That's, to me, worthwhile. If you can get younger and cheaper most of the time, I would rather do that. Mm-hmm. And this is not a 1-year deal. This was finally an investment. And it's kind of what I've been asking for, which is give me some multi-year splashes. Again, just a curious selection. But in the same way that when they acquired Deebo Samuel and there were some detractors, one of the things I said was, well, I'm not one of these guys that's just going to sit here every time they make a move and say, Adam Peters knows best. I'm not going to question him. I think Peters has more info on Deebo than any other GM that could have acquired him.
No question.
The folder that they have on that guy to go through in their boardroom is bigger than anybody else's. I would say the same thing about Javon Kinlaw, who he was around for 4 seasons, who he helped to draft in the top 15 of his draft class. That's another thing. I mean, yes, it has not worked, but I always kind of like and the Nats are big on this with Mike Rizzo, top of the board draft pick with the physical traits and the tools. He's also massive. I mean, if you're 6'5" and 320, I don't think people know how big he is because last year he wore the number 54, which was an outrage, and I hope he doesn't do that again. I guess he can't hear because of Bobby Wagner, thank God. But you know this, Danny. Defensive linemen should not wear numbers in the 50s. You agree with me on that?
I think they can wear whatever, but
other than that, you know that D linemen should wear numbers in the 90s.
Yeah, I think the 50s, 60s, 70s, single digits, like whatever makes you happy.
If you weigh 319 pounds, you should not wear number 54. That's all I'm saying. And I think people maybe don't understand how big he is because of the numbers.
Because they got confused.
No, I'm not doing a bit. Yeah. Like when you see a guy that's 54, you probably don't think of a dude who can be over top of the center as a smart car. But man, I hope they're right. They got to stop the run.
Yeah, they need to be. I mean, that's the gig, though, right?
I said last week when they released Allen, I bet you they go get a pretty good defensive tackle. I just thought it was going to be a world eater like a Milton Williams.